Josh, welcome to the InsureTech Talk. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Gilad. Thank you for having me here.
This is going to be the first episode for 2026, I think. Yeah, it's going to be the first one. And for that, we brought you in because you've been doing super cool. You're doing Plantd, you're doing climate tech, and basically, I I love to talk to you about climate tech and how it works with insurance, InsureTech, and all the crazy stuff that you know we see. And now it has like a small dash of um, politics and geopolitics, especially anything that relates to energy, climate, etc. So, yeah, we most definitely need to talk about it. But first, it's like, how about quick introduction? Tell us a little bit more about what we're doing, because I didn't want to read it from a prompt and go like, well, Josh Dorfman, he's been doing XYZ and here is CV, because that will be super boring.
Understood. Understood. Let's see, the quick version. This isn't going to sound quick, but I'll go fast. 30 years ago, I moved to China after university. I was teaching English in Nanjing, 1995. I thought I was going to learn Chinese, learn the culture, go into the CIA, have a really interesting life, and be positioned right in between what's happening between China and America and everything we now see in the 21st century. I went to China. I was teaching English, and then I started working in a bicycle lock factory, right, for an
No
American
kidding.
company called Kryptonite. Yeah, so here I am trying to learn the language, passing out cigarettes, trying to make friends. 1995 in this communist bicycle lock factory, and I got very interested in business and very interested in transportation, not necessarily bikes. But I started seeing a country that was changing from a billion people riding bicycles to a billion people that wanted to have cars. And that's when I started thinking about climate and sustainability. And I thought, man, I don't know anything about global warming, but a billion more cars on the planet, how is that going to work? And so it wasn't like it was just a straight line to the work I do today, but eventually I came back to the US. I went to business school. I went through the dot-com crash. The whole time I kept thinking like I've seen the future. I was in China. I've seen the future. I know we're moving toward this probably crisis, and the crisis is how do we continue to live extremely well and pursue a high quality of life if the environment and climate is going to actually crash into that or collide? What do we do? So my career has been focused on trying to build products, build companies, solutions that are delightful, are low carbon, are sustainable, easy for people to adopt because they fit their lives, so that we're not telling people they should change or forcing them to change, but we're attracting them to solutions that improve the quality of their life.
So last time I was in Beijing, that was in 2008 Olympics. Part of my MBA actually, our tour, whatever that was like, hey, between 2008 and 9, let's go to Beijing. We did a few tours there, Peking University and a couple of other locations. And I remember that it was unbreathable, and the government or the guide, which basically I assume it was government, etc., was like, oh yeah, this is way better. We made sure that cars, only a few cars coming into the city during the day, because we want to make that everything is ready for the Olympics. So they planned that, in advance. Like the Chinese, that hey, we have a goal, we're going to make it. Doesn't matter how we're going to make it, it's going to be accomplished. And we were like, this is fresh air. Now, that was 2008. How is it today? Because there it was still, going up. The growth is hyperbolic. I can imagine. I haven't been to mainland. I've been to Hong Kong and the other territories since then a few times. But how's the pollution there nowadays?
Yeah, I haven't been there in some years as well. I think that it's still, a massive issue, right? When I was there, the big issue was we were living, so Nanjing, this ancient capital, is on the southern side, the southern border of the Yangtze River, which basically cuts the country in half, east to west, right? The Yangtze River flows right through the middle of the country. And when I was there, if your city was south of the river, ours was, like I said, on basically on the river, then your city was warm. And so we
Mhm.
did not get heat all winter long. right? Because we were living in a quote warm city. And so I basically remember wearing long underwear almost from the time I got there in like, August, September, or by like October, probably all the way to May, because there was just no heat, because the communist government decided that it was warm. So
Of course,
the, yeah,
that's how it
right.
works.
So that's how you control the weather. And so, yeah, that's how they try to, but yeah, it's a very interesting country from from a climate tech perspective. What's so fascinating is that, they're by far, I mean, what's interesting about climate tech, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but $2 trillion was invested last year, 2025, and 2 trillion was invested the year before globally in clean energy technologies. In 2025, that's twice as much as was invested in fossil fuels. And so much of that is what's coming out of China and now being exported around the world, whether that's solar, where Pakistan has almost put 50% of their grid has gone on solar, because it's happening with very cheap Chinese solar panels. I mean, extraordinary numbers. And yet at the same time, they're also building coal plants on a scale that no one else in the world is doing too. Everything is on just such a unbelievable scale because the country's just so enormous and still developing, like you said, and still needs so much power.
So are we back to the energy crisis and everything is leading that? Because that was the thing at the 80s, if not before.
It's a new energy crisis. I think it's certainly an energy competition. And a lot of that, of course, as we know now, is being driven by AI, which has come like seemingly overnight. And suddenly the projections for how much new energy we need, and particularly in America, where energy was really kind of flat in terms of growth for almost from like 2010 to 2022, uh, even maybe declining in some places because we were becoming more energy efficient, even while our GDP was growing. Now, suddenly, that energy is spiking and everyone's trying to figure out where are we going to get it from? What kind, like, are there enough natural gas turbines? Should we be sticking with solar? What about batteries? And it's really, I don't know that it's crisis, but it's really a global competition. China, different from America, China 2 decades ago realized that they could use energy as a wedge to gain more influence around the world, right? So that's what we see. And so, one way to think about it is in the last century, in the early 1900s, and so through the 20th century, it was essentially like Standard Oil and Rockefeller, right? That largely dictated which countries developed around the world, which countries got access to energy, which countries then got infrastructure, which countries then got a tax base. Today, it's really like China, the state, has replaced Standard Oil, the company, in terms of deciding which places around the world will grow, which places will get energy. When you look at what's happening in Africa and many places in the developing world, it's a very different kind of competition that we're experiencing today.
So they are leading in terms of solar panels because they managed to get them cheap and ship them. Then we have, of course, oil, natural gas, wind turbines, which I heard so many different things about how it's actually more polluting, blah, blah, blah. I actually need to read it because otherwise I'm just talking without really knowing. There was a point that of course, nuclear, that now it's the new old hot topic. And there was a little bit of thermal and the motion of the waves that I've never seen that scale up. So within everything there, and hopefully we'll tie it back to insurance shortly, who is doing what? Because even with the oil, now we saw the Venezuela stuff, you have this type of oil versus that type of oil, that refinery, the other refinery. And let's try to keep it short so we can actually talk about the main topic.
Yeah, of course, of course. When you look at anything related to clean energy, whether that's solar, wind, batteries, China is far ahead, like so far ahead of the rest of the world, further ahead of Europe, further ahead of America in terms of what they actually build and deploy at home and what they export around the world. When you look at some of the most innovative solutions, a lot of that comes, of course, out of the US. There's really interesting things coming out of Israel. There's interesting things coming out of Europe. But sheer numbers, yeah, there's no one can compete with what's happening with China today. And just like you said, like, whether it's energy from waves, those things are really minimal. They don't really, they haven't really commercialized. But these other industries, they're really quite massive. And in the US, we don't always see it because this is a global rollout. And it's not always clear to us here at home what actually is happening in the world.
And that amazes me sometimes, that people don't truly understand, or hey, looking for the information to understand what is, let's call it, the main reasons for war or all kinds of clashes. So most of them are behind the scenes, but for example, Japan entered World War II because energy. They were about to cut them out from the energy supply and the food supply in the Japanese sea, where the Russian area is. But let's tie all of that back to Plant.
Yeah.
Please tell us about your company. What do you guys do?
Thank you, Gilad. So Plantd is, we started working on this company 5 years ago. And at the time, with me and two really incredible engineers who had been at SpaceX each for almost a decade. Just unbelievable. One of them led the life support systems team that kept astronauts alive on the Dragon spacecraft. The other has done tons of remarkable things. He actually did a lot of work on building the cone, the capsule, where that would, return. That one of the things come back from space, and he would be out in the middle of the ocean trying to, locate these capsules as they would come back down and live on a tugboat. And it's just amazing, go through walls kind of guys. Plantd, in its simplest terms, we have figured out a way to grow a biomass that grows 10 times faster than trees. We harvest it every year. It's pulling carbon from the atmosphere as it grows. We get, therefore, about 9 to 10 times more biomass per acre than you can get from trees. We can choose where we grow with more efficiency, so we can grow much closer to population centers than necessarily like trees grow where trees grow, right? And we can shrink a supply chain where we grow this grass. It's structural. We bring it to a factory where we've invented new production technology that effectively plugs in, no smokestack on our roof. So we take this grass, we slice it very thin, and then we press it into engineered structural panels as a starting point to build residential homes. So that could be for walls, roof decking, flooring. We have a contract for 100 million panels to deliver to D.R. Horton, the largest home builder in America. So for a company that's now entering, let's see, we founded 2021. We're not quite 5 years old. We're really moving at quite a fast pace. And the idea is to deliver to market a product that competes on price, that is stronger, that's more moisture resistant, so more impervious to foul weather, and has the benefit of being better for the planet. And we're doing advanced manufacturing here in America. So we're putting people to work, and we are helping farmers who were very concerned in North Carolina because there are a lot of tobacco farmers who are losing business as tobacco is shrinking as an industry. We're giving them a new crop to actually stay sustainable on their land in terms of the environment and the economics. So there's a lot of positive upside to what we do.
Why are we calling this episode Climate Tech and not not real estate tech or construction tech or something like that?
You could. We have this mission around climate internally, right? This is what motivates us. We want to pull. Basically, the idea, when you think about it from the perspective of engineers, the idea is, okay, we have climate change. What does that mean? That means there is a carbon imbalance. We have carbon in the wrong place. It's in the atmosphere because we've burned it, right? But carbon is basically one of the foundations of all life. And so the idea is, how do we rapidly take it out of the atmosphere and then put it to good use, right? Like, that's, if you want to call that climate tech, great. We do invent a lot of technology, but you could call it a whole bunch of things. We just call it, fundamentally common sense.
Which is great, because I'll give a shout out to Nick. So a bunch of, MIT, blah, 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 super smart professors, etc. For them, it's all about, our climate tech is all about getting the carbon out of the air. And we build this device that is set on the air cooling system of all those immense data centers, because data centers, they need cooling, so they have air cooling, water cooling, all kinds of them. So they built their climate tech concept to get the carbon and sell it, burn it, I don't know, bury it, whatever, but they don't care. It's like, our job is to get the carbon out. So when I think about climate tech, it's that part, especially when you're dealing with the negative carbon. So getting the carbon out of the air and kind of clean it and later on put it on one of the exchanges and sell for the credit. And that's another multi-billion-dollar industry, right? When I hear what you're doing, climate is a small thing, especially in the current kind of administration, which is all about build America. Let's find new. What you're representing here is it's like, here is a new material for construction. It's cheaper, it's better, it's safer, and the safer part is the connection to the insurance, right? Because now you have a material that does it absorb the moisture, or is just fire resistant without extra chemicals?
Well, there is a component that's fire resistant, which is part of the plant itself, the makeup of the plant. But the innovation around moisture, there are a couple, but because we can grow this grass and get to a very consistent fiber, right? And we can slice it very thin. We can press. When you make like a panel that you're nailing to the 2x4s of a house, right? Basically every house in America, that's made out of compressed wood, essentially. Those are chips. And when you're trying to put like glue in those chips and there's a lot of places for air to still kind of exist, and it's not quite as fully impervious. When you have a very consistent fiber that you can slice and then press much thinner and then just put a little bit of adhesive on, I mean, we're talking like, in the ballpark of, let's just say 3 to 5%, right? There's just no room for air to go. There's no room for moisture to go and no room to get in. So you get to something that's more impervious. And in home building, in many parts of America, moisture is a massive problem when you think about mold and you think about mildew, and right? How the structural integrity. So that's one of our innovations. We don't have to sell the product based on, hey, we're solving the planet. And in fact, if you know the home building industry, nobody buys because of that.
You, my friends, saving America. You are saving the farmers. That's what you're doing. And
That's
this
right.
ad was sponsored by no one. No, no, but
So
you kind of talked about the tobacco farmers, but nowadays when you look at the farmers in Midwest and other locations, beside corn or being basically an extension of Monsanto / John Deere and just letting their tractor robots do it for you. There are challenges of biodiversity or the different plants that you can actually use and later on get a little bit of ROI on your piece of land. And when we take that back to construction, and the current administration is all about build. Great. Now there is an opportunity to short the distance of the supply chain. You have better supply chain. If you can grow that, and you want to build here in, I'm in Southern California, but Central California is like the hot space. In Los Angeles, it's impossible to build anything anymore. But you want to do that. You just, we have a little bit plot here, but, forget the example of California. You will need so many ecological surveys that it's going to die before you can actually do anything. Take a more development, a state that wants to grow. You basically can grow your bricks a few miles away.
That's exactly right. And
Brilliant.
that's exactly,
Love it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That the real innovation, I mean, the reason why well, there's a lot of innovation, but there's innovation in the product. So there's innovation in the material. Of course, innovation in building new machines that have not been built before. That's our SpaceX DNA. But from the perspective of a very large builder like a DR Horton or the big
Hmm.
public builders, yeah, this is strategic supply chain partnership, because when you are building at that scale and you need to know that you will have your inventory and that this is locked in and that you're not beholden to a fluctuating price, which you see with wood-based materials. But we say, hey, we own the whole supply chain. We're verticalized. We can tell you what the price tomorrow and we can tell you the price in 2 years. That's very appealing to companies that really need to shore up their supply chains, especially when you think about the shocks of a war in Russia and you're trying to import Baltic birch, right, and plywood from Eastern Europe or Russia, or you think about tariffs with Canada or Canadian wildfires. All these things have huge impact on the price of the materials that we build with. So yeah, there's a lot of impact there. And one of the things I'd said to you, one of our biggest investors, in fact, the company that led our Series A funding round, has put a lot of investment into our company, is American Family Ventures, which is in many respects the investing arm of American Family Insurance, a very large insurance company here in the U.S., because they insure a lot of roofs. And this
Hmm.
product, because of the capabilities I'm describing to you, does have potential long-term implications for how we build, and even just adhering to code, still making homes potentially much stronger than how we build today.
So I'm from Ventures being, I would say, one of the main contributors to the InsurTech. 11 years into that, I'm still not sure. It's not revolution, movement, trend. I don't know how to define it. It's a sector. Let's go with sector, right? They've been one of the first investors, especially as a CVC. They've done well. At the beginning, it was only one LP. I think that now they have two LPs or even more, not just American Family, but also American, couple of other investors on the side. What's the name of the guy? Peter Gruner or something like that. He was the guy who pushed that. He was the executive that pushed it forward. Done very well in terms of making that happen. I can see that as a smart strategic move and investment from their side. Because if you're now introducing better materials and actually helping the supply chain, the construction, making houses, homes more durable. And you brought earlier that there are neighborhoods that can face Hurricane 5 in Florida that are built on with that type of a material. That will be a game changer. The biggest problem that here in California, especially here in Los Angeles, I used to live in Westwood, which was away from the fires. Now I'm in near Mulholland, so I'm near the fires. That will be a game changer because we've seen insurance companies running away. It's very hard to get homeowners insurance in Los Angeles, in California, and in Florida. They have hurricanes, we have fires, and I'm sure that in many other locations they have similar problems. And if that type of a material can make the construction either faster, better, cheaper, more effective, but at the end of the day, from an insurance industry point, can you reduce the risk? If I need to replace it and there is some sort of a claim, what's the cost of fixing it? Material. Usually they look material and work. So that will be that's a very interesting value proposition to the industry, which comes from constructions, which has elements of climate change. You talked about carbon capture within those grassroots that you grow, and that can very appeal to the European reinsurers because they are looking for something to add to the ESG. But that's kind of sorry, it's, yeah, they are forcing that in a sense. But yeah, that's cool. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Beside the Unfarm Ventures, who else invested in you guys?
Well, we've had it's interesting. We're getting ready to announce some of our best investors. We have some other strategics that will be very important to the business going forward. What was interesting in the beginning, as we were trying to raise capital, it's always difficult. You bring something new to the market. This was like a crazy idea. I was having a very hard time getting our first investor back in just 5 years ago. We're trying to raise our first $2 million. Years ago, I had a radio show on Sirius XM called The Lazy Environmentalist. So this was me trying to help lazy Americans go green. And a guest was on my show. She had an eco-friendly clothing company at the time. She saw me posting on LinkedIn about this new company, and she reached out. She said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me. I was on your show. I think my boss would be interested in what you're doing." Well, her boss, it turned out, at the time, was Biz Stone. Biz Stone was a co-founder of Twitter. Biz Stone is really like one of those kind of legendary founders in Silicon Valley. And so we get on the phone with Biz Stone, trying to explain what we're doing. And he got it instantly. He's like, "I get it." He's like, "This is civilizational scale change. If you succeed, ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to transform civilization." And it took a little bit, but eventually he wrote us a really nice check. And once Biz invested in the business, then suddenly people, of course, were looking at the deal differently. And we were able to raise that round. The other group of people who we brought in, which was very interesting, we have a pretty big contingent of former Facebook employees who became climate tech investors, in some respects to atone for all the sins they've caused in the world, are working for Facebook/Meta. And we're investing in climate companies, I think, to try and do a little bit of positive. So we have a very, very healthy mix of investors.
Yeah, it's can you share how much did you raise? You don't have to.
No. So, through the seed, Series A, some strategics, we raised about 19.5 million. Our Series B round was 22 million over the past few months. And, so there'll be, some more, most likely another raise in the future. And now we're at a position where we can also diversify the type of funding that we go after, where debt can play a bigger role in our future as well, especially as a manufacturer, right? That's hugely important, capital intensive business to figure that all out.
Oh, yes, most definitely. You reach a point that your growth, you have your revenue, you have execution, you're in growth mode. And for now, it's basically how do you manage the cash flow and making sure that just be careful with the type of short-term versus long-term liabilities that you take. All kinds of combinations, and it's when I talk with founders, and it's less related to where you stand, and they're looking to raise money, especially in the insurance industry when they have something that is a little bit more complex with really great ideas, right? However, they are misunderstanding the value of capital and how it's attached to the different investors. Because from the investor standpoint, most of it's, I have this bucket with a big label that someone wrote on with a Sharpie. This is the risk that bucket can take, or that I can deploy and allocate the funds from. So when it comes to insurance companies, you have different things. It's from, I need seed money to build a company, and that will be for capital expense or operations, versus, I need capacity to take risk as an insurance company. Now, different investors, different type of risk, different purposes. They have their own LPs or investors of investors that will go into that pile. Or if you want to do leverage buyouts and things like that, even that conversation is different. So It's very important sometimes that we have that conversation over and over again, especially when you reach a point, it's like, do I really want, and it comes with the founders, right? It's like, you reach a point that's, okay, we gave enough equity. Do we need to raise another equity round, or are we stable enough and the forecast now we can actually take debt, right? Cool hat. What is that, a hat as a hat, or the logo means something?
Yeah, this is Planted's logo. So this is a logo that looks like a building, also looks like a plant growing. I have a designer, a brand strategist I've worked with for well over a decade, who is really just extraordinary. And so one of the things that I think is really vital, and for climate tech companies, is to really nail your branding, your aesthetic, right? Really try to show up in a very, to me, an elevated kind of way. We're in the building industry, right? And so our colors really are like, we do a lot of black. We do a lot to kind of like have this sort of futuristic. I mean, we're very SpaceX kind of driven in our DNA, and all of that is intentional, right? To try to stand out in an industry where everything is like brown and green and very, always looks the same. We really do a lot to use our aesthetic to drive the differentiation and how we want the market, of course, to think about us.
Now remind me, super cool. That's marketing, or is that, what type of company is that?
Super Cool is a media company.
Media
It's
company.
I started working on it. So when I left Planted in 2024, I built this little company, Super Cool, which I'm still running today. So similarly, newsletters, podcast, YouTube. We have a course we launched, more that we're getting into. But really, the concept behind Super Cool is kind of like where we started the conversation today, Gilad, and that is with this notion that effectively $2 trillion is getting invested every year in this thing that nobody really believes is happening, and that is the clean energy future. I mean, and it's far more money that's going than is going into AI. I mean, it is on an order of magnitude that nothing even rivals in the world. And so Super Cool really chronicles and tracks and covers how that is rolling out in the real world and how that actually impacts humans, people's lives. So for example, we'll talk with companies. Of course, we'll talk with tech companies that are using AI to take over the HVAC system in a huge building, right? And use AI to cut the amount of energy you
Mm-hmm.
need. The weather and the angle of the sun and the wind speed and the cost of energy in real time on the grid, and you optimize everything. There's really cool companies doing that. We'll also talk to companies that build um, healthy hospitals or green schools, right? Where like there's fewer chemicals in that schools, there's more daylight, and there's studies that show that kids learn better in daylight. Of course, that helps cut energy. And so it's like, why wouldn't you want to have us put your kid in a school, right? Where it's like the air is healthier, there's more daylight, and all of these things are helping to, solve climate at the same time. Teachers are happier, there's less detention, less kids getting suspended, less bad behavior. Like all of these things map to buildings that are actually better for the planet, better for humans, and create better, higher performance outcomes for the people inside them. So we really love to tell those kinds of stories and get that information out into the world so we can speed up and do more of that.
Super cool. Yeah, it's very cool.
Right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Listen,
Yeah.
I have a few hats now. I don't have, although I do need a hat, especially when I go out in the sun. Um, and same thing with InsurTech LA. It's over the years it's become more on the media and the newsletters and stuff like that. We haven't been active in terms of the investments, because shifted to BMI Capital, which is my day job, BMI Capital. So this is more about having the conversations with interesting people like yourself and other founders, CEOs, investors, people who can, how can I say that? Add a little bit of color and insight into the insurance industry and the different harmonies that connect to it. Awesome. Anything else that people should know about when it comes to climate construction and insurance? That will be the holy trinity for this episode.
Yeah, of course, this cuts right to the heart of, like we've talked about, our country, our civilization, our future, right? What is sustainable from an insurance perspective, right? Like I didn't even mention it, but I did spend a couple of years running a center called the Collider, which was using big historic climate data, big data, um, to develop analytic models, and a lot of it was for the insurance industry or with the insurance industry to help model, right, like what's happening around climate and what actually can be insured. How do we think about this? And so, I've thought about this connection and worked on this connection, just like you said, insurance, construction, climate, for quite some time. And it's only going one way because extreme weather is only going in one direction. It's the innovation is crucial. The innovation, and I really like the part that's about how do we build more resilience actually into what we build so that it can be more insurable and that we can sustain our quality of life. I just think that's the piece that I want to help make a difference on.
Moving forward, especially, this is what we want for our kids and their kids. And for that's when insurance steps in. Insurance is there to, it's like something happened, let us remedy it. Not make everything better, no. Just remedy within the limitation of the one-sided contract that they have with you, that is called a policy, insurance policy. But it's up to us, the free market, to figure out how can we do something is better. Otherwise, it will be the same. Nothing is going to change. And if you can have better materials, so houses will not collapse in a hurricane. When I moved to the US, so that was like 16 years ago, one of the things that struck me very, very weird is like people build their houses with wood, or it's not even wood, where they pressed the wood chips with glue. And I was like, it doesn't make sense, because in Israel, you build it with blocks, bricks and cement and everything. The difference is that in Israel, you finish Israel, it's all 7 miles, or what is it, 200 miles, something like that. The distance, you can finish it with 20 minutes or 5 hours drive. That's it, done. In the US, you need 6 hours flight to go from New York to San Diego. It's a long flight. It's a huge country. So the supply chain is the same. And wood, as you have all the lumber industry, it's very usual. So to get cement and to build, it's not easy. And I always find it very curious. It's like, you're always complaining about fires and people who die in fires. And that's why firemen are so highly elevated in this culture, in the American culture, while in many other countries, there isn't that fire problem. Just build better buildings. And no, you cannot do that. It's impossible because of the size of the country. There is reality versus ideal, and there are very good reasons why you cannot do that. That's why, we talked about the beginning of pressing the grass that you're growing, those special fibers. If you go back, this is how they used to build bricks in Gothic time. They used to stamp on a specific clay that they had, or mud, add a little bit of hay to it. Now you have the agent that captures everything together, and you have a brick, and you lay it in the sun to dry. But now technology brings better solutions, something that is a little bit more sustainable and will hold for the freezing cold of New York, because I have a feeling that they will need it more than everyone else soon, based on what we are reading, but that's politics. Okay, enough is enough. Josh, thank you for, you're actually a guest on my on my show. I was about to say thank you for letting me talk so much about topics who are not related or almost related. No, but jokes aside, Josh, thank you very much for your time, knowledge, and joining me on the InsurTech Talk. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Gilad, I feel the same. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.